The young officer leaned back in his leather chair. He let out a sharp, jagged laugh. He looked at the old man standing across the desk. The old man wore a faded work jacket. His boots were covered in dry mud. He held a simple manila envelope in his calloused hands. "You are wasting my time, old man," the officer said. "This office is for active personnel, not for relics looking for a handout." The officer was barely 30. His uniform was crisp. His medals were shiny and unearned by sweat. He didn't look at the old man's eyes. He only saw the frayed collar and the shaking hands. The old man did not move. He did not blink. He stood perfectly still. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for pity. He simply placed the envelope on the desk. "I am not here for a handout," the old man said. His voice was like gravel shifting under a heavy wheel. "I am here for the boy." The officer laughed again. He tossed the envelope toward the edge of the desk. It slid and hit the floor. "The boy is AWOL," the officer snapped. "He deserted his post. He is a coward, just like the man who raised him, I assume. Now, get out before I have the MPs drag you to the gate." The room went very quiet. The hum of the air conditioner felt like a roar. The old man did not reach for the envelope. He did not look at the floor. He looked at the officer. It was a long, hollow gaze. It was the look of a man who had seen the bottom of the world and decided to stay there. The officer felt a chill. He didn't know why. He felt small under that gaze. He felt like a child playing dress-up. He tried to maintain his smirk, but his lip rose in a nervous twitch. "I said get out," the officer repeated. His voice was higher now. The old man spoke softly. "The boy did not run. He was left behind. I know where he is." "And how would you know that?" the officer mocked. "Did you see it in a dream? You're a civilian, a nobody." The old man took a step forward. He didn't move fast. He moved with a heavy, rhythmic grace. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, blackened piece of metal. It wasn't a medal. It was a coin. It was smooth from years of being rubbed between a thumb and finger. He placed it on the desk. The officer looked at the coin. He frowned. He reached out to toss it aside. Then he saw the marking. It was a symbol from a unit that didn't exist on public records. A unit that worked in the shadows of the 1970s. The officer stopped. He looked at the old man again. "Who are you?" The old man didn't answer. He just pointed at the envelope on the floor. The officer hesitated. He reached down. He picked up the envelope. He opened it. There were no letters inside. There were only coordinates, longitude, latitude, and a single name written in pencil at the bottom, Ghost Walker. The officer's face went pale. The blood drained from his cheeks. He dropped the paper as if it were hot. He pushed his chair back. The legs of the chair screeched against the floor. "Ghost Walker," the officer whispered. He looked at the old man's hands. They weren't shaking from age. They were steady. The old man was waiting. The officer knew the stories. Every recruit heard them in the dark. Stories of a man who could walk through a jungle without bending a single blade of grass. A man who went into North and came back alone, carrying the dog tags of 100 lost souls. I didn't know," the officer stammered. The old man didn't care about the apology. "The boy is in the valley," the old man said. "He is hurt. He is waiting for the extraction that never came. Your reports are wrong." He didn't run. He stayed to provide cover. The officer looked at the coordinates. They were deep in a restricted zone, a place where official missions weren't supposed to happen. The old man turned to the window. He looked out at the base. The smell of diesel fuel drifted through the vents. To the officer, it was just the smell of work. To the old man, it was a trigger. Flashback, the sound of rotors, not the clean hum of a modern jet. The rhythmic, screaming thud of a Huey. The smell of wet earth and burnt copper. The feeling of mud pressing against his chest. The sight of a green wall of trees. He remembered the weight, not the weight of a pack. The weight of a man on his shoulders. A man who was screaming. Then a man who was quiet. He remembered the silence that followed. The kind of silence that stays in your ears for 50 years. End of flashback. The old man closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he was back in the office. "The boy is my grandson," the old man said. "He has my blood. We do not run." The officer was standing now. He wasn't laughing. He was trembling. He looked at the map. He looked at the old man. "We were told the area was empty," the officer said. "High command said the mission was a failure. We closed the file." "You closed the file," the old man said. "I never did." The old man picked up the blackened coin. He put it back in his pocket. "Are you going to send the birds?" the old man asked. The officer looked at the phone on his desk. He looked at the door. He knew that calling this would mean admitting a mistake. It would mean trouble for his career. He looked at the old man's eyes. There was no threat there. There was only a cold, hard truth. The officer picked up the phone. "This is Captain Miller," he said. His voice was shaky. "I need an immediate patch to search and rescue. Priority Alpha. We have a downed man in Sector 4. The old man stood by the window. He watched the tarmac. Minutes passed in silence. The officer hung up the phone. He looked at the old man. He wanted to ask questions. He wanted to ask about the missions. He wanted to ask how he survived. But the old man's back was a wall. It was a wall built of secrets and scar tissue. "They are spinning up the rotors now," the officer said. The old man nodded. He didn't say thank you. "I will go with them," the old man said. "I can't allow that," the officer started. "It's against every regulation." The old man turned his head. "Just a fraction. I am not asking." The officer swallowed hard. He nodded. They walked out of the office. They walked through the hallway. Soldiers passed them. They saw the young officer in his clean uniform. They saw the old man in his dirty jacket. The soldiers saw a civilian. They saw a man who looked like he belonged in a hardware store or on a porch in a rocking chair. They didn't see the ghost walker. They reached the flight line. The air was thick with the smell of JP-8 fuel. The sound of the turbines began to whine. It was a high-pitched scream that grew into a roar. The search and rescue team was sprinting to the bird. They were young. They were geared up with the best tech. They looked like giants in their helmets and vests. The old man walked toward the helicopter. A sergeant blocked his path. "Back off, sir. This is a live extraction," the sergeant yelled over the engines. The officer stepped forward. He put a hand on the sergeant's shoulder. "He's with me," the officer shouted. "He's the guide." The sergeant looked confused. "The guide? Sir, we have GPS. We have thermal." "He has the ground," the officer said. The old man climbed into the belly of the helicopter. He didn't need help. He grabbed the frame and swung himself in. He sat on the nylon bench. He buckled the strap. He looked at the floor. The young soldiers sat across from him. They looked at his old boots. They looked at his wrinkled skin. They shared a look. They thought he was a liability. They thought he was a ghost of a man. The helicopter lifted. The ground fell away. The base became a toy set. The green forest rose up to meet them. The old man watched the trees. He didn't use the headset. He didn't need to hear the chatter. He knew the shadows. He knew how the light hit the ridges. The pilot's voice came over the internal speakers. "We are at the coordinates. Seeing nothing but canopy. Thermal is negative. It's too thick." The soldiers looked frustrated. "I told you," the sergeant muttered. "Waste of time." The old man stood up. He walked to the open door. The wind whipped his thin white hair. He didn't hold onto the safety rail. He leaned out. He pointed. He didn't point at the coordinates. He pointed 1/2 a mile to the east. "There," the old man said. No one could hear him over the wind, but the officer, who had followed him onto the bird, saw his finger. "Pilot, move 1/2 a mile east. Follow the dry creek bed," the officer ordered. The helicopter banked. The old man kept his eyes fixed on the green. He saw it, a break in the leaves, a specific pattern of broken branches. It wasn't something a machine could see. It was a language written in the wood. "Down there," the old man signaled. The helicopter hovered. The trees thrashed under the downwash. A rope was dropped. The young soldiers prepared to fast rope down. They were fast. They were professional. The old man watched them go. He stayed in the bird. Minutes passed. The radio crackled. "We have him! We have him! He's alive! He's pinned under a windfall, but he's alive." The officer let out a breath he had been holding. He looked at the old man. The old man's face didn't change. He didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He just closed his eyes. The hoist began to whine. The stretcher came up first. A young man, pale and bloody, was strapped into it. His eyes were open but unfocused. The soldiers pulled the stretcher inside. They began working on his wounds. The boy looked up. He saw the ceiling of the helicopter. Then he turned his head. He saw the old man. The boy's hand reached out. It was shaking. The old man took the boy's hand. He squeezed it. "You stayed," the boy whispered. "I stayed," the old man said. The flight back was quiet. The medics worked. The officer watched the old man. He realized then that the old man hadn't come to the office to save his grandson. He had come to save the army from its own forgetfulness. When they landed, an ambulance was waiting. The boy was whisked away. The old man stood on the tarmac. The sun was starting to set. The officer walked up to him. He stood tall. He straightened his jacket. He didn't know what to say. Ghost Walker wasn't a name you found in books. It was a name you earned in the mud. The officer raised his hand. He gave the old man a slow, crisp salute. The old man looked at the salute. He didn't return it. He didn't have a rank anymore. He just reached into his pocket and felt the coin. "Do not let them leave anyone else behind," the old man said. He turned and walked toward the gate. He walked slowly. His back was slightly bent. He looked like any other old man heading home to a quiet house. The officer watched him until he disappeared into the shadows of the evening. He went back to his office. He picked up the manila envelope. He looked at the coordinates. Then he looked at the name at the bottom. He took a pen and crossed out the word AWOL on the boy's file. He wrote a single word instead. "Found." The base went quiet. The lights flickered on. Somewhere in the distance, a bugle played. The old man was gone. But the air in the office felt different. It felt heavier. It felt like duty. The old man reached his truck. It was an old model. The blue paint was peeling. The engine groaned when he turned the key. He sat in the cab for a moment. He listened to the metal tick. As it warmed up, he drove away from the base. He did not look in the rearview mirror. He drove through the small town. He passed the grocery store. He passed the barber shop. People saw the old truck. They saw the old man behind the wheel. They thought he was just another retiree. They thought he was thinking about his garden or the weather. They did not know about the valley. They did not know about the boy. He reached a small house at the end of a dirt road. It was a simple place. The porch boards were grayed by the sun. He stepped out of the truck. His knees popped. The damp evening air made his old wounds ache. He felt the shrapnel in his thigh. He felt the cold in his shoulder. He walked inside. The house was dark. He did not turn on the lights. He knew the path. He went to the kitchen. He poured a glass of water. He sat at the wooden table. On the table sat a framed photograph. It was a picture of a young man, the boy in the helicopter. He was wearing his dress blues. He was smiling. He looked like his grandfather once did. The old man touched the glass of the frame. "You are coming home," he whispered. He thought about the officer. He thought about the laughter in that office. It didn't anger him anymore. He had seen men laugh before the fire started. He had seen men cry when the fire stopped. Laughter was just a way to hide fear. The officer was young. He had much to learn. He had learned one thing today. He had learned that some ghosts do not stay buried. The old man stood up. He walked to a small closet in the hallway. He reached up to the top shelf. He pulled down a heavy wooden box. He carried it back to the table. He opened the lid. Inside were no medals. There were no ribbons. There were only small things. A rusted pocket knife. A tattered map of a country that had changed its name. A bundle of letters tied with a black string. And a patch. It featured a white mountain and a silent owl. He laid the patch on the table. He remembered the day he was told he didn't exist. The day his unit was wiped from the books. They told him his service was a secret. They told him his sacrifice had no name. He had accepted it then. He had walked away into the trees. He had become the ghost walker. For 40 years, he had been silent. He had watched the world change. He had watched wars start and end. He had stayed in the shadows. But then the boy had enlisted. The boy had wanted to follow the shadow. The old man had warned him. "The path is lonely," he had said. "I have your blood," the boy had replied. The old man looked at the patch. He felt the weight of the years. He was tired. His job was done. The lineage was safe. He closed the box. He pushed it to the center of the table. He went to the porch. He sat in a wooden chair. He watched the stars come out. The woods behind his house were deep. They were dark. Most people were afraid of those woods at night. They heard sounds they couldn't explain. They saw shapes that didn't move like animals. The old man wasn't afraid. The woods were his home. He closed his eyes. He listened to the wind in the pines. He heard the sound of a distant helicopter. It was miles away. It was heading toward the hospital in the city. He leaned his head back. He was just an old man, a forgotten figure, a man who mowed his lawn and paid his taxes. But in a quiet office on a loud bass, a young officer was staring at a blank wall. The officer was thinking about a name. He was thinking about a gaze that went through him. The officer would never laugh at an old man again. The ghost walker had come out of the trees one last time. The mission was over. The old man drifted into a light sleep. For the first time in many years, the smells of the jungle did not follow him. The air was just air. The silence was just silence. He was finally at peace.